Ripple, of course, is our theme today. And so I really wanted to kick off this conversation with this quote. I'm sure that we've all heard it before, but when I think about Ripple, I automatically think about the word faith, and doesn't necessarily have to have religious undertones, but really faith is about moving forward without knowing the whole picture and knowing the whole story. And that's going to be one of the big premises of our conversation here today around Ripple. So Lorilla introduced me already, so I can kind of skip this slide, but that's me. I have a marketing firm agency here in Phoenix, Arizona. We focus primarily on digital content, branding, and publicity. And so if you want to connect with me, I would love to carry on our conversations on social media later. You can do that at Sara Chambers Creative, or you can follow our agency at Ellie and Nora Creative, where we put out a ton of great value-based content. So I want to kick off our time together and introduce you to another Sara. I don't know if you're familiar with Sara Blakely, but she is the owner and founder of the shapewear company Spanx. I think probably most of the ladies in the room will be familiar with Miss Sara Blakely. A couple other amazing things about Sara is that she was crowned by Forbes as the youngest self-made female billionaire. And as of 2019, she was worth this just, meager amount of $1.1 billion. No big deal. And she also is a mom of four, and her self-proclaimed mission in life and purpose is to empower and support women. So I don't know if you all have celebrity friendship crushes or people that you're like, I just feel like we would be best friends in real life, and I love kind of following along. But I have entrepreneurial crushes, friendship crushes, and Sara's really at the top of my list. I think that there's a lot of reasons for that, possibly because she's a no H Sara like I am. Her name is really awesome. Constantly drawn to that for sure, but it's likely because she is scrappy and she is smart and she has boatloads of ambition. She's my kind of Sara for sure. So Sara, like most great entrepreneur stories, she didn't start at the top. She had to start small, and Sara took what I like to consider or call smart, concentrated action. So it was this small action that led her to the next step, which then led her to the next step, which then led her to the next step. And I think part of what makes Sara's story really amazing is that she really just took the next step that was right in front of her and just figured it out. She just had a sense of, like I said, the word scrappy earlier. So Sara, when she first started, she didn't have a ton of money to get her idea off of the ground. Like many of us, when we're starting new ventures, don't have a ton of capital. So she had to get smart. And so when she came up with this idea for Spanx, she didn't have enough money to hire a patent attorney. And so she marched herself into Barnes and Noble, her local area, and she picked up a book called Patents and Trademarks, and she wrote it herself. And then she was able to take that into the office of her local patent attorney and have them write the portions that she couldn't write, and saved herself upwards of $4,000 by doing so much of it herself. But what I love about this part of Sara's story is that she didn't say, oh, that's a ton of money, I can't do that. I guess I'm gonna have to put my dream aside. I'm gonna have to figure out how to save the money to pay somebody to do this. No. Sara decided that she was still going to march forward in concentrated action, and that she was going to figure out how to do it herself. And I think that as a lot of us have our own businesses, or even no matter what career path that you're in, I think that this lesson is really applicable. When Sara started Spanx, she was selling fax machines door to door. So that gives you an idea of kind of where she was and how she took the leap into starting her own business. She had never taken a business class before. And like I said before, she really just took the first concentrated step of action that was right in front of her. And I think that that is really applicable to all of us here today. So what is a ripple? So this is the actual definition of a ripple. Also, like I found when I was looking at the definition that ripple had to do with ice cream, and I didn't know that, and I love ice cream, and so no, that's not terribly relevant to our conversation, but I feel like I really wanted to include that. So thanks for letting me. Um, I think that just in all seriousness, ripple is an incredible metaphor for what it is that we are trying to do in our lives and in our business. And the thing that stood out to me most about the idea or the metaphor of ripple is that the water sits still, right? If we're thinking about the metaphor of water, it sits completely still. And the ripple doesn't happen until someone drops that first drop. The ripple doesn't happen until someone begins that action. And I think that sometimes that very first concentrated step is one of the things that is the hardest to get going. We can look at this very large, overwhelming, looming goal, and it can be, again, super overwhelming. How do we get from where we are now to where we want to be? And I think that we're missing kind of the long goal or the long journey. And ripples really begin by that one first concentrated action. Someone has to have the courage to drop the very first stone. And so really the ripple and how I'm thinking about it and how I'm contextualizing this metaphor comes down to what I'm calling small steps. And so taking that very first small step is really where we're going to focus our conversation on today. So what I want you to do, you don't have to share or anything, but I want you to think about a time that this has been true for you. A time when you maybe stepped forward in faith without all of the answers and you just took one small step. And how did that maybe lay out the foundation for something that came later? I think that whether that be in your career or your relationships or your health, I think we can all come up with one example in our mind about a time when we can look back and say, yes, that one small step that I took in this direction actually led me to here. And I can see now looking back how when I took that first step, when I dropped that first stone, it created this ripple effect that has landed me where I am today. And I think that when we are able to look back and say, hey, I remember that happened to me, and I can see looking back that that's landed me where I am today, it starts to build this muscle and it starts to build this confidence around being able to do that yet again, right? When something seems super scary, we can look back to our own personal experience and remember, hey, that worked out for me in the past. And I think that helps build up that muscle and helps give us courage around taking small steps for something in the future, because we have that life and lived experience around a time that this actually did work out for us. So I'd love for you to just kind of hold that in your mind. And maybe if you're like me, I like to write those kinds of things down and just be thinking about that. And I think that you can refer back to that, and that will give you a lot of confidence and courage when it comes time to make these sorts of small steps again in the future. So while you're thinking about that, I want to share just a quick story about my personal example, and hopefully that will help kind of get you thinking about your own examples and how that can help carry you forward in small steps in the future. So first of all, I just want to address this quote that I'm sharing with you. Do not be surprised how quickly the universe will respond once you have decided, by one of my favorite entrepreneurs, Jessica Zweig of the Simply Be agency. If you're interested in looking her up, she's phenomenal. So if you take yourself back, or I'm taking myself back, excuse me, to Halloween of 2018. And that day, it's my favorite story. So I like to share it a lot. So if you've heard it before, just bear with me. I was working at a global humanitarian nonprofit, and it was obviously Halloween day, and being the ridiculous person I am, I marched myself into my office that day dressed as Cruella de Vil. I 100% had my hair half black, half white. I had a really great coat that I had thrifted, and I had a prop puppy, because you always need a prop. Listen, I know how to win a corporate Halloween costume contest, and I was not above going all out for the hopes of a Chick-fil-A coupon and maybe like an extra PTO day. So walked in, had a meeting first thing that morning, and what I got instead was laid off. And it was painful and terrible. But in that moment, as I carried my desk belongings out in a box, I felt like all I really needed was a car, probably a taxi. It's not really, you don't see taxis around Phoenix, but in my mind, it was a taxi that would drive by and spray gutter water all over me. And it was like the bad introduction to like a rom-com. And it's all I needed to like make this moment complete. But really what it did for me was it propelled me forward. And in that moment, I decided that I was not going to go home and panic search on LinkedIn, that I was not going to dig through my old hard drive, and try to figure out where I left the last version of my resume so that I could update it. And I was not going to panic email literally everyone I know, because I wanted to really think about what I wanted in that moment. And the truth is that I had been doing small steps and concentrated action to launch my business long before this moment in time. Because I started my business with no clients. I had been freelancing for a good decade prior to that. And the clients came. And the clients came because of relationships that I had been building for the last 10 years. They came out of, it very much seems out of the woodwork, but the point is that I had been doing small steps in planting seeds for so long that when my moment came and when this time came for me to launch my own thing, that it wasn't new to the universe, because I had decided so long ago that that's actually what I wanted. Almost to the day, 1 month prior, I registered and purchased the LLC for this business. A month prior to getting laid off, I had no idea. So there's all these small steps. And so when you have this feeling of something that you really want, and you get the sense that like this is the first thing, like I would really encourage you to take the step, to take the action, even though you can't see what it look like and all of the details of that. Just taking that one small step in concentrated action might produce a result for you later down the road that you have no capacity to even see right now. And so I hope that my ridiculous story of Halloween 2018 gives you a little bit of encouragement today. So big dreams are built one step at a time. So I love dreaming big. I think that it's incredible and one of the greatest things that you can do for yourself and maybe even for your career or your business. And I am all about manifesting and playing big, but I don't think that it can come at the expense of small steps. So I would bet that most of us here have a vision, a really, really big vision. I think like as creatives, we naturally want to show up in big vision, right? I'm definitely not immune to that. We all have really big goals and aspirations, and we want to see that vision realized. But we put an incredible amount of pressure on ourselves to just see and create something that isn't yet there and bring it to life. But the disconnect really comes when we really try to convince ourselves that there's no value in the journey, right? That we should be able to create this magnitude from nothing in one fell swoop, in one jump. And honestly, like that just discredits those who have worked really hard and those who have learned and those who have adapted. And the truth is that like I shared my story and the story of the other great Sara, is that every great success story is lined with smaller stories of failure and rejection and persistence and pivots. And that building a life of purpose and impact is actually found in the small steps. So small steps can do an array of things for us. The first one is that it removes excuses. So when you are able to work in small steps, you don't have as many obstacles to creating that very first step, right? When you think about your dreams and your vision and your goals and these very large jumps, if you will, as like the opposite to small steps, they can leave you feeling super overwhelmed. But small steps gives you a lot of permission to move forward with your goal, right? So it takes that stillness as that first step that takes the still water into the drop that creates the ripple. And we can do that, right? If you can take a large, huge goal and move it down into the small step, and it doesn't matter, there is no too small, there is no insignificant, then I think that really gives us a lot of permission to move forward and move confidently because it removes the obstacles and the excuses. The other thing that small steps does is it builds habits. So the truth is that for me personally, if you plucked me out of my current reality and you plucked me into the existence of my biggest goal and my biggest dream, the reality is that I wouldn't be ready. I wouldn't be prepared. And I wouldn't have the skill set. I wouldn't have the knowledge. I wouldn't have the lived experience by which to be successful in that moment. And when we have this expectation of ourselves to move from where we are now into the existence of our biggest vision and dream and goal, we're forgetting that along the journey, we build all the things that we need in order to be successful in that moment. And it's really about ego, right? Because we have to set our ego aside and we have to recognize that we're not quite there yet, that we still have things to learn and that we really need that refinement. And small steps just really helps us to create the rhythms and the muscle and the habits that will sustain us for when we actually realize that big goal and that big dream. So small steps helps us to actually build the habits that we need in order to be successful once we achieve the big vision. Another thing that small steps does is it brings clarity. Something that I share with my clients all the time is that there is clarity in movement, that when you're sitting in one particular place, you can only see what's in front of you. You can only see so far. But when you have courage to take a step boldly and confidently into the next step, your vantage point is completely different. You are now able to see things that you couldn't see before. You're now open to opportunities and perspectives that we weren't able to see before. And now you're able to meet people that maybe you wouldn't have met previously in your previous step. So that small step really can move you from where you are now into the next phase. And then that will be able to open up so many more opportunities and perspectives for you. So another thing that small steps does is it keeps us curious. When we believe that we have all the answers and that we know exactly where it is that we are going in the future, we just really cheat ourselves out of something special. We believe that we know the exact outcome of our journey, then we just lose our sense of curiosity. And it's curiosity that keeps us asking questions. It's curiosity that keeps us finding solutions, and it's curiosity that keeps us learning. Like I said a little bit before, it's really the ego part of our personalities that believes that we have to define our path at every single step and commit very diligently to that exact path. I know we've all heard stories of entrepreneurs and artists and authors and other people that you might follow, where these people were committed to one path. I don't know why, but like the law track always seems to stick out in, for whatever reason, I tend to like hear that like story a lot, is that people who decided that they wanted to be a lawyer and kind of set out on that specific track. And then once they realized that that wasn't for them any longer, they were able to take, again, small concentrated action and steps in a different direction. But if they would have insisted on committing to that long-term path, and then the moment that they were in, they would have cheated themselves out of being true to themselves in the moment that they stepped into. So I think that we have to stay curious and have the courage to adapt. So the other thing that small steps does is it gives us permission to fail. So I think many of us, and I don't know if this is true for everyone, but for me, like failure has been one of the biggest things that I have had to work diligently to overcome. And I don't know if it's just my personality, but you know, that feeling in your stomach when your stomach turns when you've made a really monumentous mistake, or when you have to face the consequences for like your own lack of understanding. Oh man, that is a feeling that I would do anything to try to avoid. But the reality is that when we take small steps, it takes the pressure off. It gives us a chance to try, and it gives us a chance to figure it out, honestly, when the stakes just aren't as high. It creates an environment for low impact, high frequency. So here's what I mean by that. So today, obviously, with social media and a lot of our lives being lived online, we feel this pressure to put everything out into the world for massive, like mass public consumption, right? We get, and this happens to everybody, but we feel validated by the likes or the purchases or the comments or just like the general feedback. Like when I do something, then I feel obligated to put it out and receive instant feedback. And I think that this has just kind of done us a disservice in this moment of society that we're in, and we can do a lot to sort of combat that. So maybe you need to give yourself some space to build the muscle on your big dream. So some examples are maybe a book deal just begins with private journals over the course of time. And maybe a hit song just begins with you singing in your living room for your family. Or maybe a new product just begins with you creating like a low cost prototype on like your grandma's sewing machine or something like that. And I think that we can really think about what that example looks like for us. But the truth is that our big dreams will require us to be good at our craft. And if we're only committed to the giant leaps, then there's no space for you to get good. And all of a sudden, there's no value in experience or lived life. And there's no worth in learning. But by creating, learning, practicing, and evolving in that space, it gives us a chance to create in a space that doesn't mock our failure. And it gives us a chance to not expect perfection from ourselves on day one. And I really think that this is where mastery is born. We can't expect that right out the gate, even though our dreams might be really big, that we've developed our craft enough to be ready. Again, I kind of alluded to that a little bit earlier. So I think that, what did I say? Oh yes, low impact and high frequency. So doing this where the stakes are not high, but you're doing it often enough that you can build this muscle, that you can develop your craft, and that you can create mastery, so that when you actually are in that moment of success, that you're prepared for it, that you can actually live up to the promises that you might make for your clients or for your customers. So then, honestly, the question then becomes how? So how do I commit to taking these small steps towards my goal? And I have some steps for you. So the first step really is to understand what your goal is. Seems really simple, but everybody's dream originates with an idea, but a lot of people are basing their dream off of their current skills or their current competency or just like opinions of others. And I think that we need to rethink what our big goal is. And we need to get really, really clear and really specific. So if your goal is to travel more, then you can't be so vague about it. Where is it that you want to go? And how is it that you're going to get there? Who is going with you? I mean, even things like, what are you wearing and what are you going to eat when you get there? What activities are you going to have? And create a specific plan and vision in your mind for what it is that you want. If you want to hire a team, then write the job descriptions for the people that you want to have on your team. I personally have done this because that's one of my very big goals, is to have a team I work with a lot of contractors right now, and I actually really would love to have a like actual staff and employee. So I, in deciding what that looks like for me, have already written the job descriptions of the people that I want to bring on my team so that I can be very clear and very specific about what it is that I would like to have. If you want to write a book, what's the title? What does the book cover look like? Where are you going to go on your book tour? Those are just some examples, but get very clear and very specific on what it is that you want. The next one is to refuse to stay discouraged. So everyone is going to get discouraged along the way. The difference comes when you decide how long you want to stay there. So will you let the discouragement be the reason that you stay in the step that you're in, or will you use that as motivation and learning and lived experience that gives you the boldness and courage to step into the next small step? And then the next one is getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. I think we've all heard the quote that goes something like, you can't have what you've never had if you're not willing to do what you've never done, or something along those lines. Like, the truth is that stepping into even the small steps is going to be uncomfortable. And that is something that we're just going to have to get comfortable with doing. You have to be willing to step outside of your comfort zone and move forward in bold and courage. The next one is to write it down. So there was a study that I looked up when I was preparing for this chat that came out of the University of Pennsylvania. And it said that, well, actually the study was primarily focused around health outcomes, but I think that the message is still really applicable to us. It said that people who had a particular goal, a big vision in mind, were much more likely to succeed if they would write down what it is that their next step was, and also write down the date that they intended to do that particular step. And it gave them this sort of self-motivation around a deadline, and it propelled them forward in a way that was not true with participants who did not write it down and then also put a date on it. So it helps them sort of follow through with it. So I want you to get started right now. This is kind of like a fun exercise. I would love it if you all would take out your phone or a notepad, and I want you to write down the one big goal, dream, vision that it is that you want to accomplish. I want you to think really, really big, really high level, and get very specific. And I think that you all know, like, you know which one, you know which dream this is, because this is the one that you think about all the time. You think about this when you're not thinking about this, you know, it pops into your mind in the middle of the night or at random times. It's the one that maybe you're like a little bit scared to share with your family or your friends or your peers. And I want you to get really clear and specific with it, like we talked about earlier. What does it look like? What does it feel like to accomplish that goal? And what are all the specifics around it? And then I want you to break it down into the first, what is the first small step that you can take to get you towards that? And write that one down. That'll get you closer to realizing it. And then I want you to take that step and I want you to make it smaller. I want you to make that step so small that there is literally no obstacle for you to be able to do that. Maybe even today, this week for sure. There's no reason that you shouldn't be able to accomplish that one small step. And there's no step too small and no step that is insignificant. Because like I said previously, once you have decided, there's power in that. Once you have gotten clear about what it is that your big goal is, that first step tells everything in the universe and in your own experience that that's what you want and that you're moving boldly and confidently in that direction. So don't worry about writing down the second step. That's not the point. The point is to write down the very first step and then make it as small as it can until you know there's absolutely no reason and no obstacle for you to be able to accomplish that.